2 question, and it starts off as a Voronoi diagram, as we can see by the very clear clue there in the start of the question. It does say that point A is not shown, so it's not a mistake that that one's not on there. It says that 1 unit represents 1 meter and point B is located at 2,6. So I'm actually just going to label that one there as 2,6. And the equation of the perpendicular bisector between A and B is y is equal to 4. So that's this one here that's drawn on for us. And we need to find the coordinates of A. So if it's the perpendicular bisector, with your pencil there, you can see that if you're kind of 1 unit away there, then A must be a mirror because it's a perpendicular bisector, and therefore A is just here, which is the coordinate of 2, 2. So for the first one, it's 2, 2. And then points C and D are located at 9, 0 and 10, 6. We need to find the coordinates of the midpoint. So the midpoint, if again we use our pencil, if I connect those points together, you can see that the midpoint is here. So the midpoint formula is that we add together our x coordinates. So we have 10 and 9, and we find the average, so we divide by 2. And then we can add together our y coordinates, so 6 and 0, and again divide by 2. And that formula is given to you in the formula book. And my midpoint is 9.5 and 3. And then the second part of the question is the equation of the perpendicular bisector CD. So I need to find that equation, and it asks for it in the form of y equals mx plus c, or you might have done y equals mx plus b. So the first thing we need to do for a perpendicular bisector is to find the gradient. So the gradient of CD, and that's the change in y values, so 6 minus 0, over the change in x values, so 10 minus 9. It doesn't matter which way round you add or subtract, but you have to do the same way round for x and y. So I chose to do 6 minus 0, so d minus c, and then I therefore had to do d minus c with the x as well. And if I simplify that, that just gives me a gradient of 6 over 1. And that means that the perpendicular gradient of CD is going to equal minus 1 over 6. So it's always the negative reciprocal, or you flip the sign and you flip it upside down. So swap the sign to a negative, flip it upside down, and it becomes 1/6. And it asks for the full equation of the perpendicular bisector. So this is where we use our incredibly useful formula, y minus y1 equals x minus x1. And we're going to substitute all the information we know. So it goes through the midpoint, which is a y coordinate of 3, and an x coordinate of 9.5. So this is where you substitute your midpoint, and this is where you substitute your gradient. And our gradient of the perpendicular is minus 1 over 6. So we can now expand that out and simplify. So y minus 3 equals negative 1/6 of x, multiplying out my bracket, minus, or plus even, and then this is going to become 19 over 12. And if you're not sure how to do that, we can literally do it on our calculator. We go to negative 1/6, and we're going to multiply that, multiply that by negative 9.5. And we can turn that to a decimal by going math, turn to fraction, and we can see it's 19 over 12. So if you're not sure how to do them, or you're not confident, then use the calculator to help you with the number work. So now we can add on 3 to both sides. So y equals negative 1/6 of x, and we're going to add on 3. So take our previous answer and add on 3. And that gives me 55 over 12. So plus 55 over 12. And that's now written in the format of y equals mx plus c. So for this part of the question, the first one was 1 mark, so that's just for the coordinate 2, 2. The second one was for 2 marks, so it's 1 for the x and 1 for the y of your midpoint. And then for the last part there, there's 1 for working out the gradient of 6, and then 1 for converting that to the perpendicular, -1/6. There is 1 mark for successfully substituting into this point, and then there's another mark for rearranging. So if you don't feel as confident with algebra, if the only thing you missed there was the rearranging, that's only actually worth 1 mark anyway. So the second part of this question, it says that customers in the restaurant are waiting to take their food, and they've calculated the wait times for A, B, C, D using the nearest neighbor interpolation. At the point 4, 6, how long am I going to wait? So 4, 6 is this coordinate just here. I've actually covered it up. And we can see that the closest one is obviously B. So to find out how long they take, I actually just take the answer from B, which is 5 minutes, and therefore we expect them to take 5 minutes. And then we want to see whether or not the customers at the food store spend more money at the weekend. So we're going to use a t-test with a 5% significance level. So they tell us that the null hypothesis is that the means are equal to each other, and it defines the first mean as the money spent on the weekday and the second mean as the money spent on the weekends. We need to state the alternate hypothesis. So if we go back to the question, it says they want to determine whether customers spend more money during the weekend. So that means that we're expecting the weekend one to be larger. So we need to use that when we do our null hypothesis, or our alternate hypothesis, sorry. So HA is the first mean is going to be less than the second mean. The second mean was the weekend, and we expect that one to be larger. The owner considers collecting her sample from 2 weekdays and 1 weekend and records the amount spent on the first 12 orders. So this is a convenience sampling. They've just took the first 12 and it's the most convenient way for them to do it. They've just gone with convenience. What do they come across first? Systematic would need to be some sort of ordered system, and stratified would need to be taking into account the proportions. So for example, if there's 7 days a week, 2/7 of their sample should be a weekend, and then 5/7 of their sample should be a weekday. We need to state one disadvantage. There's lots of different things you could write here. The first 12 could be breakfast, and maybe they spend a different amount. Maybe different people go in the morning at weekends versus weekdays. It's not necessarily a fair representation if you're not taking them throughout the whole day. There's lots of different things that you could write in why it's a disadvantage. And then the last question there says that they've conducted the p-test or the t-test, and they found a p-value of 0.0897. And we need to state the conclusion. So at the start, they told us it was a 5% significance level, and they have found this is essentially 8.97%. So the p-value is bigger than the significance level. And when the p-value is bigger than the significance level, when the p is big, we accept. So we have we write this down as the significance level is less than the p-value, and therefore we accept H0. So we accept the null hypothesis, which is that actually the same amount of money is spent both days, and it doesn't matter whether it's the weekday or the weekend. So the marking here, there's 1 mark for the 5 minutes, there's 1 mark for the correct null hypothesis, there's 1 mark each for part E, and then the 2 marks here, 1 is for the answer and 1 is for the reasoning.